we're going to find the domains of each of these functions. So f plus g of x. That's simply adding these two functions together. So x plus 2 square root plus the natural log of x squared minus 3. Now we've got two rules in play here. We have a square root of something, so that something has to be greater than or equal to 0. We also have a natural log of something, so that something has to be greater than 0. Alright, so this tells us that x is greater than or equal to negative 2. And here, this says that x squared, I'll factor this, x minus root 3 times x plus root 3 has to be greater than 0. Okay, so this gives us a couple of values, negative root 3 and positive root 3. And we're going to look at those on a number line and see what works out. And if we plug in, say, just 0, 0 squared minus 3 is negative. That's certainly not greater than 0, so that doesn't work. We plug in a number up here, say 2. 2 squared minus 3 is 1. That is greater than 0, so that works. And the same thing with negative 2. So we have two things that need to be true. X has to be greater than or equal to negative 2, and it has to be in these intervals, negative infinity to negative root 3, and root 3 to infinity. So we're going to look at these each on a number line and kind of just look at the overlap. So first of all, we'll do this x greater than or equal to negative 2. So we'll go to negative 2, and it can equal negative 2, and it can be greater than that. Okay, so that's the possible ones for that. And then we have this rule here. And so at negative root 3, so there's negative root 3, and positive root 3, okay, we cannot equal those, because we have to be strictly greater than 0. And we can't be in between, we can be on the outsides. So we can be greater than the positive or less than the negative. And now we look for the overlap. And so we do the overlap, and by just moving from left to right, and the moment we start getting both colors, that's what we have. So that starts right here at negative 2. So from negative 2, we start, and then we move, and then right at negative root 3, cuts off. We're not allowed to have negative root 3, because it's empty in the red. And then all the way through here, we don't have any red, so we're not allowed to have that. And then right at root 3, we start back up. But again, it's empty for red, so we don't include it. And then after that, forever and ever, we'll have both. So that goes to infinity. And so there's our domain of f plus g. All right. Now, turns out the others are almost identical. Okay, notice, so that was part A. For part B, f minus g is, well, it's just square root of x plus 2 minus the natural log of x squared minus 3. And that means we have the exact same rules, right? X plus 2 has to be greater than or equal to 0, and x squared minus 3 has to be greater than 0. So nothing changed. So the domain here is the same. Negative 2 to negative root 3, and root 3 to infinity. For part C, f times g of x is, well, we're just multiplying now. So square root of x plus 2 times the natural log of x squared minus 3. And we have the exact same rules there. X plus 2 has to be greater than or equal to 0, and x squared minus 3 has to be greater than 0. So our domain for this is also the same. Now you may be wondering, well, does that just mean that any combination of functions, that the domain will always be the same? Well, let's see. For d, we have f over g. Well, that's the square root of x plus 2 over the natural log of x squared minus 3. Well, all of a sudden we have a new rule. A new rule has been introduced. We're not allowed to divide by 0. So natural log of x squared minus 3, we're not allowed to let that equal 0. Doing e raised to both sides, we get that x squared minus 3 cannot equal 1. Adding 3, we get x squared cannot equal 4. Thus, x cannot equal plus or minus 2. So now we have a third rule. Okay, we're going to do this. X cannot be positive or negative 2. So we're going to come down over here. Negative 2, we create a hole. And at positive 2, we create a hole. Now we can be anything except for those, at least for this rule here. And so, there's our line there. And so all of a sudden, our overlap changes just a tiny little bit. Notice that we no longer are allowed to include negative 2. There's a hole there. Okay? But we can still go to negative root 3, and then root 3. But then we're not allowed to include 2. So we've got to cut it off there and break it up, and then from 2 to infinity. So there's our domain for part D. So notice that f plus g, f minus g, and f times g, those all had the same rules because they all had the same unique things going on. They all had the square root and the natural log. But then when we had f divided by g, we introduced a division, and so that changed our domain.